With me is Stas Lifshitz. He's from Israel. He's in the 269 movement, 269 Live movement. He's a doctor. And today he's going to present the movement in Israel. And he speak about the new sanctuary those guys are putting up there. And enjoy.
Thank you. All right, well, before I begin with presenting the sanctuary farm, which was supposed to be the focus of my speech, it has come to my awareness that our movement is controversial in Europe, so I have made a certain presentation, a certain spoken word presentation to show you what we are about, what we are really about. And later I'll present you what actions those pictures that I'm going to show you came from. And I would love to hear feedback from you. I would love to answer your questions because I think that what we are doing is very important. And I would love to have your support and your understanding of the things we're trying to accomplish. So here we go. How far would you go? How far would you go for what you know is true? How far would you go to give a voice to the voiceless? This is how far we went. We seared our flesh because we know that our suffering and theirs are the same. We went to hell to bring back evidence of what they go through every single day. We have made the walls of the slaughterhouses transparent so the meat eaters can see what it is they pay for with their blood money. We have pierced our flesh with fishing hooks to show that our pain is animals' pain. What would you do? How far would you go? We were beaten for presenting on a holiday the hypocrisy of the meat eaters' celebration. We were arrested for protesting the completely legal and lawful presenting and dismembering and slaughtering of our brothers and sisters. How far would you go for what you believe is true? What would you give of yourself? Would you yell to tell of the crimes of mankind? Would you get dirty? Would you lay yourself on the ground to present what is really happening? Would you let yourself feel, if only for one short moment, what they feel, the pain and the humiliation and the day-to-day suffering? How far would you go? Would you give your body to stop those engines of hate? Would you give of your time? Would you step out of your own comfort zone to stop what you know is the biggest issue humanity now faces? Would you give of your art? Would you give of your mind? Would you give of your creative soul? Would you make art in the face of destruction? Will you create in the face of death? How far would you go? Would you sacrifice of yourself for those who are sacrificed daily? Would you take the rules and laws and taboos they have taught you? Would you take them and break them? Would you smash to the ground the consensus that human suffering takes precedence? How far would you go? Would you have the courage to yell at the face of humanity and to tell them that we need to change? Would you have the courage to tell them that if we do not change our present, then we will have no future? And would you dare live again as a true person, as a human animal, as an equal? Would you learn that pain is pain and that suffering is suffering and that love is love? Would you open your eyes? Would you learn empathy? Would you help us? Now, I'd like to get back to a few of the pictures you've just seen. And before I go to the presentation and show you the lighter side of what we're doing, I would like to see if any of you have any questions about what you have just seen. So this is just one of the many branding events we had all over the world. And those are done for sort of for shock effect, but what happens is people see how the things that are considered completely normal in the animal industry, what terrible stress they cause, how horrible those practices are. What you see here is from the Czech Republic. It is an anti-fishing demo, of course. And again, the idea is not to have a regular protest while you stand around with signs. It's not that we don't do it. We do it, and we do it a lot. But we feel that if you present your image in a new way, then maybe, just maybe, some of it sinks slightly deeper. Now, those two pictures, this is a cat puppet. It is filled with sort of Satan meat replacement. And we went on the Israeli holiday called Independence Day, where the most usual thing to do is to fry animals on a grill. And we went to the biggest place where they do that. And we set up a sort of shop. It's called The Cat Without Boots. And we made a mock demo as if we were grilling cats and presenting them to people. And you can see the result. It wasn't very beautiful, but what we needed to do is we wanted to present the hypocrisy of people. And I think that message, it has been in the news a couple of weeks after we did it. It stayed in the news. People were rather shocked by that. You see here anti-fur demos. And you see an anti-hunting demo. And the idea is really, as you see, is to do something slightly different. Another thing I wanted to present you, and it is one picture. And I wanted to show you this picture because it means a lot to us. You don't understand what it says on the signs. This was done on Holocaust Remembrance Day in Israel. And this is a memorial to all forms of life undergoing Holocaust. The sign in the middle, you can barely see it like that, I'll make it larger. The sign in the middle, here, it says, "We shall remember and never forget." And it is something we use at every Holocaust Remembrance Day. But in here it is meant to signify the 150 billion victims of an ongoing Holocaust that we oppose. That was a very powerful demo, and of course it has also been to the news. A lot of the things we do go on at least national news level. It is very important for us that things are not only a protest that stays at the place of the protest, but it's something that goes and people who have not been there are exposed to our message. So, before I continue and present to you our newest project, are there any questions? No. All right. That's fine too. This is slightly greener. And what I'm presenting now is our newest project, and you will see it is a slightly different idea than what we have been doing up until now. We are starting the first Mediterranean, Middle Eastern actually, sanctuary farm. The idea for the sanctuary farm came before all those pictures you have seen. It came when the few founders of our movement saw a calf, a purely white calf. You can see him running now because he is no longer imprisoned. And he had this number in his ear. It was a dairy farm, so we knew he didn't have much time. And something in the way he looked made us think that what we want to do is we want to create a world where he won't have to suffer. The movement was founded on October the 2nd, 2012. And the idea is to have a movement which is completely dedicated to the abolitionist animal rights approach. We are completely opposed to any form of animal cruelty, to any form of animal use, to any form of animal exploitation. And the idea is to put non-human animals first, because we feel that, well, this is the biggest crisis we are facing right now. The situation of the farm animals, the situation of the lab animals, the situation of the wild animals is so much more important than any other issue you could address. The idea is to diversify the methods. The idea is to have different things done, and I think the slideshow I had before showed you how different the methods we use are from what you would usually see. But what we do now is slightly less painful to activists, although having to work long hours in the sun is still quite difficult. But what you can see here is just a picture from the farm, and you can see a bunch of activists working. We're clearing the ground. The idea was that quite a few people really gave up their regular lives to go and do this thing. They gave up their regular jobs, they gave their stability, and they now live at the farm, and they now work on setting this up. This idea was not a spontaneous idea. It took about 2 years of planning to get to the point where territory was bought and when building has began. We consulted with specialists. We have many different specialists inside the movement, but also many people who are friendly to the animal liberation idea and many people who have experience from other farms from all over the world. We had them help us and see how we can create a farm which will actually continue to exist, because to set up a farm is an ongoing challenge. The idea of this farm, besides being a sanctuary to animals, which is the most important part, is to be a hub of action, is to be a hub of compassion. The idea is that people can come and they can see those animals that they are used to seeing as a steak or a sausage or a hamburger. They could come and see them as they really are. So, bit of statistics. The farm is supposed to hold various kinds of animals. It's supposed to hold hens, ducks, sheep, cows, geese, turkeys, goats, rabbits, and rats. We have a few very active people who rescue rats from laboratory experiments. So we figured we can get some place for them as well. What we're trying to do there, we have in our movement quite a few veterinarians, quite a few doctors. We strive to give veterinary care to animals, even if in the end they can't stay in our farm and they have to stay somewhere else. Our farm should be a safe haven where they can stop and get treatment and get rehabilitated for a bit. The idea is to have various activities there. The idea is to make it a sort of a community hub for animal rights activists, but also for non-animal rights people to come and see, in the hopes that through seeing and through participating in this, they will become animal rights people. We are trying to pull different groups to come and visit. I think this is appropriate for people of all ages, from the kindergarten to the very old people, for youth movements, for political groups, and of course for the international crowd as well. Now, our idea of this farm is for it to be self-sustainable, and the sustainability of the farm relies on certain things that like merchandise, like spreading the message and having people come, having workshops that are passed by activists to people visiting the farm, and of course seminars and gatherings that are supposed to bring a sort of stability to this place. But also the idea is to be self-sustainable in a more serious way, is to have the electrical energy. Right now, all the electrical energy of the farm comes from solar energy. We are not connected to the grid. The idea is to have your water system be as recyclable as possible, with gray water systems, which are now partially active already. We have quite a bit of farmable land, which will grow the crops to feed the animals, and is supposed to grow the crops to feed the people living there. Compost, of course. Now, of course, the idea is the farm is not a capitalist business. It is not supposed to produce revenue for us to gain anything, but it is supposed to be sustainable. So we are venturing on some ideas of how to make this agriculture help us sustain the farm. Vegetable garden, certain herbs, certain mushrooms, all sorts of stuff that is supposed to bring back revenue in order for us to support this farm. The idea is, in the end, is to have a farm which will be unreliant on outside donations, and I'm afraid we're not there yet. This is pretty much what I was talking about. We're running an Indiegogo campaign, and we are raising funds for this via various means. Right now, we are still in a stage where we need outside sources of funding. We will probably finish our first year in debt, and we are fine with that. We have a plan of how those things should go, and we plan that we will, after this first year deadline, we'll make a zero balance at least. All right. This is probably the last thing I have to say here. We need your help. We need your help because we are starting out this enormous project. It is the first of its kind in the Middle East. It is the only farm in Israel that provides sanctuary to all forms of animals. There is nothing like it that we have right now in Israel. And farm animals who are liberated in any way have nowhere to go except for to us. Right now we still need the funding, and I was hoping that in my address to you, you would spread the word that this thing is happening right now in Israel and it needs your help. If you're interested, I would gladly later show you the balance. The whole idea is to have transparency in it. There is nothing in this we won't disclose. It is all open, and you can see what everything costs, and our investments, our expenditures, etc. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for taking the time to learn about 269. This is the time I would love to hear your questions. I would love to answer them. So here I am. Feel free.
Thank you very much. Any questions in the back?
So thank you so much for doing all what you do. And I just have a small question about your action, the cat without the boots. If you could tell us a little bit about the details and also what was the reaction of the people, because we saw that there was some, I don't know.
It's called violence.
Yeah.
There was some violence.
So what happened and why did people react so like that? So, yeah.
Well, I'd love to answer that. The whole idea was to present the idea that the animals that those people consider to be pets and that those people consider to have a soul and a right to exist alongside humans are in no way different than the animals that they fry and barbecue. Now, we chose the date because on the Independence Day of Israel, you have the biggest amount of people going to barbecue. It's like the national pastime at this time of year. So we set up a stand and we made some fake cats and we put them on grills. And even before we actually got to the part where we were supposed to go around and sell our idea to the people, people started reacting because, you know, to be presented your hypocrisy in such a direct manner, it really provokes people to make the worst kinds of things. And we were kind of beaten up, yeah. We were beaten up, not very severely, now serious injuries. And the police came and they separated us. And of course, they arrested the 269 activists. Because the idea is, if you get beaten for doing an animal rights thing, it's probably your fault, right? And they arrested us, and they tried to charge 269 Life activists with animal cruelty. Yep. And fortunately, our judicial system, our judges, have slightly more sense than our police. So the activists were released without charges. But the whole idea was grotesque. This thing was in the news It was in our major government-funded news network. It was on TV. It was in the newspapers. It was in the internet. I think you could hear echoes of it in the internet, I mean as part of a newspaper, not as comments, for at least 2 weeks. People still remember this action. I talked to some people who eat meat and they remember this action because it shocked them so badly. And I know of people who changed because, you know, I don't think many people do, but some people, when they understand their hypocrisy, they change their ways.
Did people actually think that it was cat meat?
Yep.
Ah, okay.
Anyone else?
Hi. I missed a little bit of the beginning, but if it's going to be repeated, I'm sorry. But I wanted to ask about the farm, how you get it to start. I mean, especially the land. How did you manage to get the land, and especially financially, how you started out?
All right. The land was a part of a research we did of how the land laws work in Israel, and there's sort of a remnant of the mandate, so it's extremely difficult to purchase land for certain things. But we consulted with lawyers, and we got a permit to actually use farmland. We rent a really big stretch of farmland that hasn't been used for anything smart for the last 30 years. That's why it's so much work to get it cleared out, because it is filled with literal bullshit. And the capital came from an investor. Now we have to return that money to him, but we had an investor who gave us part of the money. The activists invested some of their funds. It sort of became our life project. You know, people left whatever they were doing to go into that project, and they brought their funds with them, as well as we are, of course, organizing. We had, on the 26th of August, we had a very big evening in a vegan restaurant, in a very big, fancy vegan restaurant in Israel, where we gathered some capital. The idea is, of course, in the beginning, to get donations, and in the end, for the farm to sustain itself through some viable crops that you can go for export, and through sort of activities we do inside the farm. So right now we're gathering the capital from pretty much whomever will help us. The idea for later is to be completely self-sustainable.
Thank you. So you didn't buy the land, so you rented it for how long?
Right now it's 10 years.
Thank you for your presentation. Can you answer the question, more broadly with your group and generally animal welfare groups and individuals in Israel, is there outreach to fellow animal advocates in Palestine in helping them deal with the work that they're doing for animals?
Now, if you have seen the last pictures I've shown before the presentation, just the pictures, we have done a few very successful protests with activists who are Palestinians who live in northern Israel, in Nazareth and Haifa, that turn to the Arabic-speaking crowd. Now, unfortunately, we do not actually have any contacts with groups in Palestine, but would love to have them. What we're doing now, we're just focusing on what we're doing in Israel, and it doesn't matter what religion you're in, what language you speak. We had very successful protests in those. Haifa is a mixed city with pretty much 50% Arabic population. in Nazareth, which is a purely Arabic city. We did very successful protests there, and I'll show you the picture. Those are actually some of the most successful protests we did, because the funny thing is, you know, the crowd in those cities, unlike, for example, Tel Aviv, where you have 15 vegan restaurants and protests every weekend, this crowd has not been exposed to our message, and they were surprisingly accepting of it. They were very friendly. It was really great work. So you see those actions, and you see some very good activists that come from those areas. And some Arabic metalheads. We have that too. Anyone else?
I want to know your personal trajectory, if you may, as a vegan, and if you see changes in Israel, how veganism is developing in Israel.
All right. It's difficult for me to answer this because I really want to be optimistic. I really, really want to be optimistic. See, we have seen some great things happening. We have seen so many places that suddenly spring with a vegan menu. We have seen shows on TV whose hosts have suddenly turned vegan, and now those shows promote a vegan lifestyle. We have seen celebrities who turn vegan and now promote a vegan lifestyle. We have a few politicians from the Knesset who attend our protests and make speeches of it in those protests. And those speeches are not welfarist speeches, those are liberationist speeches made by actual politicians. And that would be wonderful. But on the other hand, we are still protesting actively a law that will enable the import of calves from Australia to the Israeli meat industry, and we are not that successful in it, although it is constantly protested. And the figures are good. We see an increase in veganism. We see an increase in the amount of that people talk about animal rights, but it's really hard for me to be really optimistic because I think that we have still so far to go, and well, there's so much work to be done.
Hello. Do you have any other stance than animal liberation, such as anti-industry or anti-state, especially considering what happened 2 months ago in Gaza, for example? Did you make any manifestation against the killing of innocent in Gaza Strip?
All right, well, this is a valid question. Now, the 269 Life movement is an animal-first movement. It means that what the movement itself is doing, it focuses solely on animal rights, it focuses solely on animal activism. So as a movement, there have not been protests, there have not been a manifesto, because the movement itself is dealing with the animal issues. And the reason we are doing it is because when in Israel you want to organize an anti-war demonstration, you go like this, and in Tel Aviv you have 20,000 people come out and have a protest. When you want to do an animal liberation demo, you do like this, and then you keep doing it, and maybe, if it's really big, you might get 1,000. So we are focusing on this specific issue. Now, we have activists come from all sorts of things. We have a very radical anarchist feminist kernel of activists who of course go and protest those issues. We have all sorts of stances that activists have inside the movement, but the movement itself is an animal-first movement, and although those issues are doubtlessly important, we would hate to dilute our message because in the greater scheme of things, those 150 billion who are killed yearly, to us, this is the issue that gets so much less focus than it should. So that's where we're focusing.
Thank you. I want to ask something similar related to this. We never see what's happening with the animals, with the bombing and everything. You know, in Turkey, for example, we had a lot of animals that was killed during the Gezi protests and stuff. So we brought it up, and I'm always wondering, like, nobody speaks of anything else except for humans during all these events. I have another question actually about the farm again. How do you get your animals? Do you buy them, or do people bring them to you, or how's it done?
All right, so to address the first question, animals were hurt during the war on the Israeli side, on the Palestinian side. You had the Gaza itself is probably, as you know, is very, very densely populated, and the agricultural zone is very near the border. In Israel, the agricultural zone is very near the border. So bombs going this and that direction were falling, and you could hear, for example, in the news, a bomb fell in an open territory in southern Israel, no one was hurt, and then they'd show you a picture of place where cows live and half of them are dead. So nobody was hurt for the news. And of course, the idea is to help those animals. For example, now we have a new issue. Our head veterinarian decided that some dogs that have escaped from the Gaza Strip need to be poisoned with strychnine for their terrible crime of surviving the war. So we are protesting that. The idea is that those animals are always innocent, and the idea is to help them as much as possible. It is, of course, veterinary aid mostly. It is, of course, finding homes for them. Now, the way we get animals to the farm, we never buy animals. Animals are not property, you do not buy them. And if you buy an animal, then you are funding the same person who will buy another animal and put it in the same condition. So we never buy animals. The animals we get are animals who are given to us. Some of them are injured, some of them are not fit for slaughter. Some of them we negotiate with farmers. For example, battery hens, when they reach the age of 2 years old, are gassed down because their production rates decline. So we negotiate with the farmer and we say, well, don't gas them, just give them to us. The idea is to get animals without sponsoring any of the industries that hurt those animals. And that is for us the most important thing, because the greater issue is to make those industries gone.
Oh, hi. I want to say thank you for all this very good work you do. And I wanted to ask, first of all, how many members do you have, your 269 movement? And then the second question was, you know, you evoke the Holocaust of the animals and, you know, make a comparison with the Holocaust or the Shoah. And I just wonder how, you know, how useful that is, because so many people, you know, are shocked, or I guess that's, you know, part of the intention, to shock people into a realization, to awaken them to, you know, the murder of animals. But, you know, when it also alienates people, even, you know, animal rights activists too, it alienates people, and, you know, it also brings about negative publicity. What is the usefulness in comparing the mass murder of animals to the mass murder of Jews?
First of all, I just want to say that I have waited for this question because this is the one I'd love answering most. I don't mean the amount of members because I have no idea how many members we have worldwide. I have no idea. The kernel of the people who are active in Israel is relatively small. I think about 30 or 40 people who are really the kernel of activism. But when I was working at this farm, we had people who never did any sort of activism come and help us. So when you do something good and people see that it is a good thing you're doing, they come and they join and they help you. So the kernel, the planning body, does not need to be very big in order for that to be successful. And of course, it is an international movement. So we have activists in Germany, in the Czech Republic, in South America, in Russia. I have no idea how many there are. It is not a centrally controlled organization, see. Now, the Holocaust idea. Well, you see, the Holocaust idea is not our idea. We did not start it. We are not the ones who started using it. It has been a comparison since the Holocaust, really. And the comparison is valid not only because of the whole animal rights issue, it is valid because the techniques for the mechanized murder of not only Jews, but also the physically and the mentally disabled, homosexuals, gypsies, and other holocausts around the world. Ours is not the only one. Those ideas have come from the animal industry into the human mass murder industry. So this comparison is really valid factually. Now, about its reception. Well, you see, in Israel, we have still quite a few Holocaust survivors, people who went through all this. You would not believe how many of them are vegetarians now or vegans because of the experience, and how many of them have themselves compared those issues and have spoken about how what is happening to animals in those industry farms is the same thing that happened to them. So the comparison for us is factually valid. It is backed down by the people who went through those horrors. So I don't mind people taking offense at this, because we are not going around saying that the Holocaust was a good thing. We're going around saying that it was a horrific thing. We're just going around saying that this horrific thing never ended, that it is still going on right now under your noses, and you are part of it. Not you, of course, but those people who we are talking to. And I have to say that the amount of negative publicity we get for it is no different, in my opinion, than the amount of negative publicity you get for doing a meat out and telling people, here, it's Satan, come eat some, it's tofu, it's good. You get negative publicity because people will not open their eyes to the crimes they are part of, and it doesn't really matter which tactic you use. They will be against it because to them, it will be to expose the hypocrisy they have been a part of for all their lives, and it is extremely difficult to say that for this and those years I have been wrong.
More questions? Or comments?
All right, then. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to stand here today and talk to you. Have a wonderful conference. Bye.